All right, so in the last 48 hours, there have been a ton of polls that have dropped. We had Mayor's drop polls, we had Emerson drop polls, and a bunch of other polls that dropped. And today we're going to try to get through as many of them as possible, but not in this video. It would just be too much. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Mayor's polls that talk about Texas, Ohio, and Florida, and how some of the numbers just don't really look right, but we're going to go over that one. I will be doing another video about the Emerson polls later, so watch out for that video. But I also will be doing a live stream tonight at 7:30 Eastern time because it's just, there's so many polls to go over. It's better to just do those polls on a live stream than it is to do a video, because it would take me hours to just do a video, record, edit, and all that. So I will be doing a live stream at 7:30 Eastern time. So go ahead and tune in for that. So let's go ahead and start looking at the polls in the Marist poll. So let's go ahead and start off with Ohio. All right, so when we look at the Marist poll in Ohio, we can see it was in the field the 3rd through the 7th of October with 1,327 likely voters, and it really was a mix of phones, online, text, everything, with a margin of error of 3.2%. And as you can see in this poll, Kamala Harris is just down by a few, 52 to 46, a 6% drop. That is definitely close, but that is still within the margin of error. And I decided to go ahead and throw up the Senate race here as well, since they polled that. And you can see Sherrod Brown is only up by 2%, which could be a little bit worrying. Now, if we break down Ohio into party, we can see that the parties are pretty much where they should be. And you see the independent number actually split in half, which is good for Kamala Harris. Now, if we look at male voters, we see that Donald Trump is up with male voters 56 to 42, and that is actually pretty close compared to what we've seen in previous elections. So we see Kamala Harris having a little bit of a bump. I don't know how much we can read into that, but there is a little bit of a bump nonetheless. However, with women voters, we can see that the numbers are essentially the same between the CNN exit poll and what we are seeing right now in this poll. Now, if we look at white voters, which are 84% of the population in the state of Ohio, we see Donald Trump up 56 to 43. This actually would be a swing in Kamala Harris's favor, and it almost seems like a little bit too much of a swing, but it could be happening. Who knows? Now, when we look at black voters, who are 11% of the population, now we get into some of the problems that we've seen with a lot of polls where we have black voters going around 20% for Donald Trump, which just does not line up with reality. We've seen these in polls in the past for the last 20 years, and it never pans out on election day. As we see with the 2020 exit poll, Joe Biden won 90% of black voters. Now, if we go ahead and break this down into geography, you can see that the Cleveland area is an area where Kamala Harris is pretty strong. Now, I don't know if that includes kind of the industrial Northeast as well. I think it might. So that actually can white working class voters be coming back to the Democratic Party? It's absolutely possible. In the North, we see 52 to 47. That seems about right. So my guess is that might be Parma going all the way over to Toledo. Again, don't know what they have there. The West is going to be strongly Republican. The Columbus area seems a little close for me, but I think that could be it. I don't know if it's just Franklin County, but it does look okay. In the Cincinnati-Dayton area, that seems about right. When you are in and around Cincinnati, you have it very Democratic, but then once you get out of Hamilton and stuff, it starts becoming really Republican. All right, well, so with that being the case, you kind of see female voters and male voters kind of like switching a little bit, and all of a sudden you see white voters doing other things. I mean, it just doesn't seem to gel. It just seems like things are kind of moving and going in kind of weird directions. However, the shifts are small. They're not really huge shifts. So these could actually be happening. Now, that 20% or 18% of black voters, that's not going to happen. It never does. It never will. However, can we see this small shift in white voters? It's possible, especially if we see that Cleveland area number going up. Again, I don't know if that includes like Canton, Youngstown, all that area, Akron. I assume it does, but it might not, because I didn't really see anything for like the east or the northeast outside of Cleveland. So I don't know where that includes. All right, let's go ahead and break down the Texas poll. All right, so let's look at the mayor's poll for Texas, where again, it was in the field from the 3rd to the 7th, 1,365 likely voters, mixed methods, as I mentioned before, with a margin of error of 3.3%. So Donald Trump is up 55 to 46 in this poll. That would be outside of the margin of error, meaning Donald Trump would win this race. Now, when it comes to the U.S. Senate race, we do see Colin Allred actually a little bit closer. So this is within the margin of error, giving him a little bit more of an opportunity to go ahead and win this seat. Okay, so if we look at the party vote, this is pretty much what we expect. And independents just very slightly going in Donald Trump's favor. If we go ahead and look at mail voters, we see Donald Trump is dominating with the mail voters 58 to 40, but that's almost exactly in line with what we have seen in previous election as far as mail voters in Texas. Now, when it comes to female voters, this is also pretty much in line with what we see. Kamala Harris has 52% to 47% for Donald Trump. So we can see that those numbers are what the exit polls had in the past. Now, when it comes to white voters, which are about 60% of the voters in 2020, according to the exit poll, we see that Kamala Harris has 37%, which would be an increase from what we saw in 2020, and Trump down a little bit. Again, as we saw in the Ohio poll, are we starting to see white voters maybe start shifting towards the Democrats? That could be possible. Now, when it comes to Latino voters in Texas, we see this one becomes a little bit more concerning for Kamala Harris. And because they're 23% of the population, Kamala Harris is only up 51 to 46, considering Biden had 58% of that vote last time. That would be a significant decrease. Now, again, when we get to black voters, we have the same problem that we had in the Ohio poll, where we show Donald Trump winning 20% of black voters. This is 12% of the overall population. And if we look at 2020, we see that Donald Trump only won 9. And as I mentioned before, since 2004, we've always seen this kind of mispolling amongst black voters. And at the end of the day, it just never pans out. Now, let's go ahead and go to the geographical breakdown. So we see the Dallas Metroplex area. That seems about right. I assume they're including all the counties in and around Tarrant County and Dallas County. So that seems right. Houston area, that seems okay as well. So I would go with that. I expect that to be a 50-50 area. South Central, I assume this is essentially Killeen and Austin all the way down to San Antonio. That should go Democratic, and that makes sense. The West, very Republican as well. And the Southwest, I assume that includes El Paso. But again, don't know what Southwest means according to any of these polls, unless they actually explain it. They really don't. But that 57% number actually would indicate that Kamala Harris is doing a little bit better amongst Hispanic voters. So that's a little bit of a contradiction than what we should be seeing. So when we look at the Texas poll, we can see that Hispanic numbers start to close more and more and more, whereas we're also starting to see the white vote close more and more and more. Is this a possible trend? I don't know. These numbers kind of look a little bit all over the place as well. So I'm not really sure how that is. But let's go ahead and look at the Florida poll and see what's going on there. Now, before we go over to the next poll, I know a lot of you are not subscribed to the channel, but you do watch, and I thank you very much. Just please hit that subscriber button really quick and just hit that bell to be notified of the upcoming videos that I do and live streams as well. So thank you all very much for your support, and let's get back to the video and to the next poll. All right, so here we have the Florida poll, and we see that Kamala Harris is just down by 4% with a margin of error of 3.6% of 1,257 likely voters, with everything being the same in the other polls. So that is definitely in the margin of error. And if we look at the Senate race, we see that this is a close one and definitely within the margin of error. So this is one that a lot of people have been putting on the radar. Maybe it is, because I'll tell you what's happened in Florida with the hurricane. That could be a game changer. Now, if we look at Florida Man here, Florida Man is at 55 to 43 for Donald Trump, which is essentially where we saw Florida Man in the last election, according to the exit polls. And if we look at Florida Woman, we can see that Florida Woman is at 55 to 43, which actually is a little bit better for the Democrats. So that's something to keep an eye on. As I mentioned before, with white voters in the other two polls, here we see a major shift. And this is why I really am kind of a little skeptical of this poll. You see Donald Trump with only 53% of the white vote compared to him having 62% of the white vote in the last election. Now, if we go ahead and look at black voters in the state of Florida, that's 12% of the population. Again, we have 24% of black voters going for Donald Trump. That's not going to happen. Look at the last exit poll. That was only 10%. Now, if we go over to Hispanic voters and Latino voters, we can see there is a difference here. So you can see with Latino voters, Donald Trump is up 58 to 40, 18%. Now, if we look at the 2020 results, we can see that Biden won 53 to 46. So this would be a significant change. Now, as I mentioned with the black vote, that seems like an odd change. We're not really going to see it. But if we actually look at the exit polls from the 2022 midterm elections, Ron DeSantis got 58% of the Hispanic vote, where Charlie Crist only got 40%. This is one of the reasons why I've been saying Florida might actually just replicate what it did in 2022, even though this is a presidential year. This number should be very concerning for Democrats. Now, if we break it down by party, I kept this for last due to the fact that you can see that it's pretty much the same. Now, that independent number, don't let that fool you, because Democrats just look at any exit poll when it comes to any election for Democrats. They always win independents, but they end up losing the election. A lot of times they can win them by quite a large number. So this isn't really a determiner of what could happen. The Republican number is just much, much more in the state of Florida. So you can see with Florida, we kind of have a lot of things going on that, some things might seem legit, some don't. We see the white vote coming down, which again, we're seeing that in all three of these polls. That narrowing of the gap, that could be happening, but it seems like it's happening a little stronger than I would expect it to be happening. Now, we look at the black vote. Again, we've seen another one with 24% of black voters going for Donald Trump. That is not going to happen. But that Hispanic number actually flipping. As I said, that is indicative of what we saw in 2022 with Ron DeSantis. That could be a true number. We don't know. Other polls are kind of all over the place when it comes to Hispanic voters. So we'll see what happens in the election. This demographic is just kind of a wait and see, but it is indicative. We have seen those numbers we saw them in the last election. So it is possible that it could happen. Now, I want to go to the age distribution because this one was also kind of a little bit weird in some ways. So I wanted to save that for last. So let's go ahead and go through the age distribution for each of the states. All right. So I mentioned with the Marist poll, it's kind of weird, and it's because they do it by generation. So if we look at Gen Z and millennials in Ohio, they're favoring Donald Trump. Now, of course, Ohio is a more Republican state, but with the boomer number and the greatest generation number being that high, baby boomers being that much more Democratic than the Gen Zs and millennials seems highly unlikely. Usually in exit polls, we see these going the other way. As a matter of fact, in 2020, those who were 18 to 29 years old voted for Joe Biden, 55 to 42. So that just does not seem to jibe with what we have seen in previous elections. Now, when it comes to Florida, we basically see the exact same thing. I mean, almost the exact same thing. The millennials going for Donald Trump slightly, Generation X with a big lead for Donald Trump, and then the baby boomers and the greatest generation just slightly ahead for Kamala Harris. So this trend that we see is in that poll as well. And then finally, if we go to Texas, we actually see more of a uniform distribution, but basically Donald Trump is winning every single group. And if we look at 18 to 29-year-olds back in 2020, Joe Biden won those 57 to 40. So this 52 to 47 number for Donald Trump seems a little bit odd, but the other distributions actually seem about where we should expect them. So the fact that we have these big age distributions should make us wonder about these polls. And I really don't think with a lot of the crosstabs we've seen, the Hispanic vote getting bigger, the black vote being at 20%, but then also the white vote kind of getting closer and more in Kamala Harris's favor. It's almost like all these crosstabs might be kind of bad, that they equal out to be a good poll. I don't think that, But if you just look at these crosstabs, you can kind of tell that they just don't look right. And as much as I'd like them to be close, it might not be, it might be, because all of the kind of little bits and offs that we've seen in this poll, I really can't tell if it favors one side or the other. I just say the data is off. So if you have Hispanic margins coming down as well as black margins, but then you have the white margins coming down as well, who does that really benefit, right? And this is where I just look at this poll and I'm like, those are the questions I have. The closing of those margins, I really don't know who it benefits, and I really don't think it's indicative of the population. The only one I do want to keep an eye on, and we'll see it in the exit polls come election day, is that Hispanic number in Florida. If that Hispanic number is at 58%, which it was for Ron DeSantis back 2 years ago, then Florida essentially is pretty much a lost cause at that point. So, and that white number in Florida was way too close. It's not even nearly that close, okay? All right, well, thank you very much. Watch out for the Emerson poll video. I will be having that out shortly. So have a wonderful day wherever it is you are. Make sure you join the live stream at 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time, right? I'm in the Central Time Zone, so I always have to remember which one. Thank you all very much. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.